Yo, YouTube, what is good? So basically this video is going to be a video where I cover a variety of questions that I asked you guys on YouTube. I basically, made a post saying that I'm going to be answering a bunch of questions. So please go into detail about stuff that you guys have been struggling with on Mage. And yeah, basically let's just get started. So I'm going to kind of just be going down the list here. The first question we have here is Blink or Shimmer. So basically, Shimmer has a 25-second cooldown. I'm running flow of time, so it says 23. And then regular Blink has a 15-second cooldown, 13 with flow of time. And you get ice flows, which lets you cast while moving. So basically here, some mages play Shimmer baseline, and they like that and they do well with that. Some mages play ice flows baseline and they do really well with that. And then other mages kind of go back and forth between the two based on the matchups. So honestly, I want to say it comes down to personal preference. However, in my opinion, I think it's matchup dependent. I want to say into 85% of the games that I play ice flows almost always, because personally, I find myself being a lot more comfortable with it. I really like Blink Stun because I think it just fits with how Arcane is moving around the map and whatnot. And also the other specs too. I didn't mean to say Arcane, just Mage in general. I think it fits Mage playstyle very well. The fact that you have Blink on a short cooldown. The Shimmer cooldown being 25, in my opinion, is where it kind of loses me. Shimmer is like more fun to play with because you can blink and cast spells mid blink, and it's off the global, so you can blink DB sheet people off global, which is very good. And since you do have Master of Time, you can actually reset the cooldown, so you technically have like 3 charges of it almost. So basically when I play the two is, like I said, I play ice flows 85% of the time. If I'm fighting a Mistweaver monk or a priest healer, it's all based on the healer. Then I'll pick Shimmer. If the DPS are DPS who either have only one stun on a long cooldown / medium cooldown, such as like Mistweaver Shadow Priest or Mistweaver Ret Paladin. Since the Mistweaver is really hard to CC without Shimmer, then I would play Shimmer because the DPS has a long cooldown stun. The Shadow Priest has a 45-second cooldown stun, and the Ret has a 60-second cooldown stun. So a counter example would be if I was fighting DH Mistweaver, I would not play Shimmer because the DH has stuns on a short cooldown, and then obviously I would just have to change how I play. Probably wouldn't push him for CC that much against that team, and I would just play more like a long game. Wouldn't push for CC too much unless it was super free. So basically that's going to answer that question. Sorry, I kind of rambled on about that. How do you play, sorry, I'm going to get on to the next question here. How do you play with people on your team that do not know how to play with a mage? Could be in solo shuffle. I feel like this thing stands out for mages more than other classes, and I personally struggle getting that DB sheep or DB ring in some situations, even as Arcane, because who I'm playing with doesn't help to get a setup. They break my sheep, etc. Mage is super strong if put into the right environment / situation, but how do you make it strong without being in that favorable situation? So this is honestly a good question because that kind of exemplifies what solo shuffle is. It's mage in a situation that is like an uncontrolled environment. It's not a RMP setup type situation, and finding value and knowing how to navigate those games can be hard with not a whole lot of experience. So I'm gonna kind of respond to this question with, it's not really about playing with people who don't know how to play with a mage, because people even at high ratings, it's not that they don't know how to play with mages or whatever. I don't think that's really the question. The question is, how should you as the mage play the matchup based on the comp you're playing? So for example, part of your question is, people are breaking my crowd control. Well, if you're playing DH Mage and DK Mage, obviously they're going to break crowd control. I mean, like, that's just how the comp is going to go. There is no really, unless positioning is, they're pretty far from that DPS class. you're probably not going to get CC, or you shouldn't be going for CC. If you're playing DH Mage or DK Mage, honestly, that's not how you should play the game. You should play the game where you're pumping damage. You're trying to just maximize your DPS as much as you can. I know Mage is typically seen as this like push in, CC the healer, then do your burst. But based off the comp you're playing, if you're playing with, like a very consistent high burst DPS, like a DK or Demon Hunter, someone who breaks CC all the time, then you have to kind of shift your playstyle towards more like, I'm going to do 1,000,000 damage to the point where the enemy healer actually has to cast to be able to heal them. Like, their instant healing isn't going to be enough because you guys are doing so much damage. And then once they have to cast, that's when you push in for like a blink counterspell on one of their casts. So it's a little bit of a different play style. You're not exactly always pushing in for the sheeps unless obviously the opportunity is extremely obvious and it is being shown to you that the sheep is completely free. For example, if you are doing a bunch of damage and their DPS kind of runs behind the pillar, LOSing their healer, and then the healer has to push out to obviously heal the DPS, and then they're off their pillar, the CC becomes kind of free, especially if your DPS is far away from them and won't break it. But you shouldn't be breaking your back, breaking your neck, pushing in, trying to land CC against all odds. It's just not how you play Mage in those environments. So that's kind of my answer to that question. Let me just continue now. What are your thoughts on Blink, Shimmer, and Ice Flows? Kind of already answered that. Is it better for the Mage talent tree to go down in time manipulation into freezing cold, or would you take frigid winds into shifting power? So this is kind of a spec specific question. So for Arcane, I'm rocking, let me move my camera here, just down a little bit here. You can see this is kind of the match, or the spec that I'm playing, almost baseline. So it's not a question of shifting or not anomaly. Basically the answer is you get both. Let me reread the question real quick. Freezing cold. So freezing cold is very nice. However, in my opinion, you can't really afford it as Arcane. If you see my fire build here, you will see that like in this spec, for example, because as fire, you do want time manipulation when you're playing with a rogue or any kind of setup based comp. And then you do have this free talent if you want to play Meteor and Shifting Power. So this does give you the free talent point to go into Freezing Cold. However, I personally prefer Displacement. So that's what I prefer. And then if you aren't playing Meteor, then if you're not playing a setup based comp, then you would want to play Anomaly. So it's not a question of Anomaly or Shifting. You can always get both. I don't take Shifting as a Mage, so I would never drop that. All right, let's get on to the next question here. At the moment, what is the best Mage spec for each PvP mode? 2v2, 3v3, RBGs, and why? Okay, easy question. So I have actually a thing about this in my Discord, but I will just kind of go over it briefly. Basically, in twos, the best spec is actually Fire Mage. The reason why this is because the best comp in twos is Sub Rogue Fire Mage. Arcane Mage is a pretty close call from Fire Mage in twos as well. For example, Sub Rogue Arcane Mage is probably the second best comp that mages have to them in 2v2. And then Frost Mage is probably the worst in 2v2, just because you don't really have a good comp, and the other two comps simply play sub RM a little bit better. For threes, Arcane is the best in threes at the moment at high ratings. No one's really playing Frost, and then Fire is only seen in sub RMP. You could play with Asa RMP as well, or like RMD or whatever, but in my opinion, Arcane is better in those scenarios, so Arcane does take the treat for that. And then RBGs, I would probably go ahead and say Frost Mage is going to be the best, because the amount of cleave pressure that you can put out. You have Orb, Blizzard, Ring of Fire, you have Glacial Spike, which no one's looking at you. Your Splitting Ice talent is causing your Ice Lances to cleave down everybody. It's just really good in RBGs. So, okay. Explanation on burst and mini burst cooldowns. I keep getting interrupted when I try to go for combos. Normally I can protect Surge with Massive Viz, but I'll get kicked on the subsequent Arcane Blast, or missiles. Right now I use Surge, Palm, Arcane Blast ×2, Barrage, but it feels underwhelming in a lot of cases. So what I'll talk about this real quick is, for example, the kind of thing that you discussed here was that you get kicked on subsequent casts. Basically, the rotation that you laid out is a little wrong. So let's just say that you have your surge from stealth, right? Because you said you were fine doing that. So we're surging Magi, and then you said you're getting kicked on this arcane missiles here. That's why you're canceling it instantly, because you just want to use it to proc this nether precision buff, and then you use your 2 arcane blasts, and then you can see you're hitting much harder. And then you would send your barrage and your orbs, and then from here, basically what you want to do is you want to send these. If a DPS is on you and has a kick available, you wouldn't want to commit to this cast. You would want to juke it, or you could eat the kick. Let's say you do get kicked on those missiles. You want to already have been thinking about, okay, there's a chance I get kicked on this. If I do, I'll place a Ring of Fire. Use your other schools of magic. So it's something that it's kind of like a mental thing. You always need to be thinking about, if you're going for a cast and a DPS is on you, what are you going to do if it gets interrupted? So just to reiterate, you would surge Magi, you would consume your clear casting missiles for like 0.1 seconds just to get the buff. I'll show you what I mean. So you would have a stop casting macro. I have mine bound to mouse wheel down. It's literally just / stop casting. Use your missiles, cancel it instantly so you don't get kicked, and then you would palm double blast. And then, like I said, you want to dump your instants, and then if you have clear castings, you can use them. Walk behind a pillar as you're channeling it. Then you can use ice flows to walk behind a pillar, peek out right as you want the cast to go off, like that. There are a lot of ways to avoid, but just know that if a DPS is on you with a kick available, just be thinking in your mind, what is the next spell I'm going to cast? So if a DK is on me, I'm not going to be surprised when I get kicked on this Arcane Blast, right? Instead, I'm going to maybe cast a Ring of Fire first. He's going to kick that, but I'm only casting it because I know he's going to kick it, and then I can just cast my Arcane School, you know? So it's just weaving interrupts. Basically, that's all. Next question here: would Mage Windwalker work for 2s, and if so, what Mage spec would be the best? So it's not really that great of a 2s comp. I don't think you're gonna have a bunch of fun playing it. However, if that is like what your IRL friends or whoever you're playing with is playing, you can make it work. It's just basically an extremely budget version of sub rogue RM, because you only have sweep every 1 minute. Honestly, what I would play with that comp is maybe Frost Mage, because you actually bring Snowdrift to the table, so you could actually maybe do more goes off DR instead of just waiting for leg sweep. You actually have Snowdrift to potentially stun someone, force a cooldown, because if you play with a Windwalker, the stun is 1 minute. So you're going to sweep someone, and then their trinket's going to come up, and someone's going to trinket, save themselves, and then 1 minute later, you have another leg sweep, you use it, the other person's going to trinket and save that target. And then another minute passes, leg sweeps back up, and the target that initially trinketed has trinket again. So you need another stun in there to kind of throw off the cooldown trading rotation from flowing so perfectly. So that's probably what I would do, as I would run Frost Mage with that comp. What is the biggest difference between a good mage and a rank 1 mage? It's a hard question, because I'm trying to think of like who I know that's a good mage but isn't a rank 1 mage, and what's the difference. I think honestly the difference comes down to partners. Like, rank 1 mages have better teammates, better partners, and a good mage, maybe they don't have the experience that, or the experience in the titles, so potentially they're gonna have to work a little bit harder, because they just don't simply have the teammates. I'm not sure if that's how you meant this question. If you meant like in terms of what is the difference in skill between a good mage and a rank 1 mage, it's maybe just a good mage would find himself maybe more vulnerable, like not positioned correctly in as many scenarios. Honestly, that's probably how you meant the question. Ignore the first part, I guess. Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is positioning. Like a good mage might have the mechanical ability that a rank 1 mage would have, like juking, landing this, DB rings and DB sheeps, whatnot. But maybe they would find themselves positioned a little worse at times, whereas a good mage is pre-running the goes, being a lot more slippery, knowing how to win the mobility race a little bit more between specs, just being a lot more slippery, hard to touch, hard to kill type thing. So that's probably what I would say. Is it normal to get killed as an arcane or as a mage if you are being trained by too hard DPS melee? Solo shuffle, arcane mage, 1700 CR, learning WoW first month. Okay. What works for me is playing with instant alter time. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Freeze them and then blink. What to do in that situation? I managed to survive like 3 goes, but then I die. Probably I die when I start to try to poly healer. That is true. And then I can end that horror. My job is probably just to survive in that scenario without wasting offensive blinks. Yes, definitely. So basically what you're talking about here is kind of the issue that I mentioned a lot earlier, where you're not blinking in necessarily and just trying to land the CC like you would be in like an RMP situation. So like you said in solo shuffle, what I want to really reiterate with solo shuffle is that damage is king. Damage in solo shuffle is how you win games, because dampening is ramping up so high that if you're just doing the most damage that you can with defensive positioning being hard to, if you're doing the most damage and you have defensive positioning, so you're taking less damage, you're inevitably always going to win that way, because of the way dampening works. Healers are going to run out of healing exponentially quicker in solo shuffle, causing them to have to cast more, causing them to have to push up more, and then once they do in those scenarios, once they have to cast, once they have to push up, then that's when you take that opportunity to go for CC. You don't want to force it. So like you said, let's see here, instant alter time, freeze them and then blink. So first of all, great. Alter, blink, that's great. Then once they use a mobility option to get to you, this is what I would change. Then this is when you want to root them and then alter back. Then they have to use another mobility option to get out of the root. They use another mobility option to get to you. And then because you altered back from Master of Time talent here, alter time resets the cooldown of blink. So then they use another mobility option and you have blink off cooldown again. So you would use it. So you're close. You alter, then you blink, and then once they get to you, before you go back, that's when you would Nova them, and then whenever you alter back, you would get another blink. So that's a really, really good sequence there. So yep, we'll just continue to go down the list here. Unpopular opinion, but I struggle into melee playing arcane. If I'm kicked, I can't do damage or CC. I end up trying to waddle to a pillar with a warrior smacking me. So this is great. The fact that you say a pillar, this is basically how you play into melees. So just know, if you are out in the open like this, and 2 DPS charge to you, and your blink path, your kiting path is you go like, let's say you start here, DPS charges you like a warrior, and you blink over here, it's very easy for the DPS to just get right back on you, right? And you also are in line of maybe the healer who has a purge, constantly purging you, so there's a lot of issues with being out in the open. That's not to say you should never be out in the open, but it's just something you should be aware of, that if the enemy warrior has cooldowns up and your kiting pattern is into the open, obviously the DPS are going to be able to stick on you. So what you said, blinking to a pillar, that's a great option. There is something that you can do that's very mechanical. It's like a very mechanical outplay you can make, and that's knowing the blink range. So 20 yards, you should be able to tell what that is with your blink, and then you should be able to, know, like I know standing right here that if I blink, I'll immediately be able to walk around the corner like that. And then now I'm instantly out of line of the DPS, so they can't use, charge on me. Let's say maybe you're snared, right? So there's actually this talent here, Energized Barriers, which is amazing for kiting DPS around the pillars. But the timing is crucial, and this is where I see a lot of people screwing up when they're getting trained, is they're just using their barrier purely as damage absorption. when you should actually, let's say maybe I'm 50% life right now, instead of barriers and then blink, and then, you know, by that time the DPS re-chains devices you, re-hamstrings you. What I would want to do is I would want to like get closer to the pillar. You could either walk to it or you could blink to it. Like I said, like if I blink here, the warrior charges me. I would get to around the pillar. Let's say I'm hamstringed, then I would use my barrier as soon as the warrior is like on global cooldown, and then that would remove the snare, and then instantly you can start running around the pillar and kiting them. That is a great tip, and then you should be able to abuse the pillar from here on out. If the warrior is, you know, chasing you around here, you can peek out and put a slow on them, or an arcane, like if you're here and the warrior is chasing you around the pillar, you can peek out and you can Frost Nova real quick, because you can actually abuse the delay on Frost Nova to just like instantly peek out, Frost Nova, and then turn around. You could charge him, walk around, he snares you, let's say again, so you're snared, you wait till you get around the pillar, barrier removes your snare, and then you're around the pillar again. So it's great that you're trying to get to the pillars. That's step 1. Step 2 is abusing your barrier as a movement option, not just damage absorption. Okay, here's another one. Why don't I see mages in PvP? Why are mages being trained so easily by any and every melee? Why do mages get legit one-shotted by MM hunters? So you don't see mages in PvP because, for one, they're the hardest ranged class to play. Secondly, it's like you said, pretty much if you play mage, you're signing up for getting trained every game. And most people don't really enjoy that. I personally enjoy that part of the class. I'm not saying I love being trained down to the ground, but I find it as a very rewarding class to make work, you know, despite all of its cons that mage has with it. I personally am I've always played mage, you know, I never won't play mage. And then to address the last part of your question, why are mages getting legit one shot by MM hunters? That's simple. There's one cooldown that marksmanship hunters have that you need to look out for. It's called double tap. Basically, double tap takes their rapid fire and it makes it into 2 rapid fires. So that's what's one-shotting you most likely. There are 2 ways to outplay this. If you're a night elf, as soon as they use rapid fire with their double tap, what you can actually do is make a weak aura that shows you double tap. Weak aura, double tap right here. And then that's how you know they'll have double tap up. If you guys want that weak aura, just Google double tap weak aura on Google. Their next rapid fire is going to do double damage, but really easy counterplay to this. You can just meld it as soon as the rapid fire goes off, which will cancel it. Or you can mass invisit, or you can greater invisit. There's a bunch of different ways you can avoid that. And then from there, on the rest of their true shot aura, just LOS it. You can peek out and close on them if they try to disengage on top of you. You can do the Nova peek around strat like I told you earlier. Yeah, really simple stuff. Alright, and I think that's kind of all the questions we have. Actually, there is one more. How do you one-shot with Mitch, or arcane build? How does he get 34 crit? Zone into a BG can only stack 24. So I do, actually, this is important. I do want to address this. I know you guys are seeing the clips of mages, arcane mages, one-shotting stuff. I just want to make this clear. This isn't how you consistently win games as arcane or as mage in general. That build is very cheesy. You basically are playing to win in the opener in an arena match. Your entire build is structured around your first mass invis, arcane surge, palm blast. It's not a very consistent build. You aren't going to climb to high ratings playing this. I'm not saying you can't try it out for yourself, but in a high rated game, having no haste, your build being all scuffed because you're trying to, you know, play around the opener, and against good players, they might die to it one time, but then they're going to adapt to it, and that's why it's an inconsistent play style, because you know, players who have no idea how they're dying, they're going to adapt. They won't have any idea how to adapt to what they're dying to. But good players in the game, you know, you might kill them one time with that build, and then they're gonna see what happened, and then it's never gonna happen again. So it's not a consistent play style. I highly don't recommend you know, trying to learn the game this way, trying to cheese people. I would just, you know, try to practice the real way, which is like haste first, playing, you know, an actual arena build, and then trying to work through cooldowns, CC people, kite them, you know, win the mobility trade, stuff like that. So that's all I really have for you guys today. I hope you guys benefited from this. Sorry, it's kind of like just a, I would call it like an unorganized video where it's just me kind of rambling about topics instead of, you know, me like giving, you know, clips and examples. It's kind of just me rambling. I am making an arcane mage guide as we speak, so that's going to be more of like a structured guide. This is kind of just like a, you know, hold you over type thing until I'm finished. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. That's all I really have, and peace out.